President Trump's Middle East envoy, Jared Kushner, is in talks this hour with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, following his rare meeting on Sunday with Hamas leaders in Cairo. It was the first time that Jared Kushner sat down with Hamas officials since October last year, when they met to finalise the ceasefire and the hostage release deal. The Board of Peace envoy and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was supposedly in that meeting, along with the head of Egyptian intelligence, Hassan Rashad. Now, under the proposed 15-point plan supported by President Trump, Hamas has agreed to disarm in exchange for a full Israeli military withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. But that agreement was rejected last week by the Israeli Prime Minister. There are hardline elements within his government who don't want a peace deal. There are some, like the Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who make no secret of their opposition to the negotiations. And in criticising the recent reduction in airstrikes in Gaza, he has gone even further. Speaking on a podcast over the weekend, he said, "I think the targeted assassinations should be carried out in Gaza, taking down 30 to 40 every night. Not just those who pose an immediate threat. There are people there who are not worthy of life. They shouldn't live. They're not even people." Well, those comments will no doubt be condemned, but there is a broader group in Israeli politics, no doubt, beyond Ben-Gvir, that believe the Prime Minister should maintain a hard line on Gaza. And with elections pending, he is under serious pressure not to deviate from that. So what leverage, if any, do the Americans have? We've been speaking to Oliver McTurnan. He is the director of Forward Thinking, a conflict resolution charity. He gave me his assessment of how much the Americans have to sway the Israelis.
We've been saying for the past 20 years, the only way to address this conflict is by inclusive engagement. Now, this message seems to have got through, and I hope that this will be the beginning of the process. But as you rightly said in the introduction there, that Netanyahu, I don't think he wants to see some sort of agreement where they have to withdraw from Gaza. I think a lot of Israelis feel that the message that should be sent, you mess with us, there are consequences, we take your land. So we don't vacate the 70% of Gaza now occupied. So there's a lot of pressure outside the Ben-Gvir and Smotrich group around Netanyahu. I'd say about 70% of Israel, I understand, would want to see him, as they say, finish the job in Gaza. That's not just see the demise of Hamas, but clear Gaza of Palestinians.
And the timing, Oliver, does not lend itself to this process. We're approaching the third anniversary of October the 7th. There is an election imminent in Israel. Does that make it politically difficult, do you think, for Netanyahu and indeed for the Americans?
Yes, I think it does, Christian, because as you know, when elections are around, public opinion is all important, and sometimes decisions are made in a short term that can have long-term consequences. I fear if there isn't response now, it is a real missed opportunity of moving from the cycle of violence into a real political cycle of dialogue, where once and for all we can find a durable solution to the Palestinian issue. But I think we had a chance meeting in Davos a few months before October 7th with Kushner, and he advised us not to burn up any more calories, as he said, doing what we're doing, because he had found the solution. He said it's economic, but the Palestinians are too stupid to understand it. Now, I hope that the meeting yesterday was an indication of a change of his mindset, that he realizes it's not an economic issue, it's very much a political issue, a grievance issue, and has to be addressed at that level.
In your considerable work in the Middle East, which has stretched over many years, Oliver, I know, you have drawn lessons from the experience in Northern Ireland. How did disarmament work there in terms of the sequencing? And are those experiences relevant in this case?
They're very much relevant, Christian, because as you know, it took 7 years after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement for the IRA to put weapons beyond use. And the reason it takes so long is if you have an armed resistant movement, you have to be very cautious and careful in the process of moving into the political field, because the risk is that you'll get factions breaking off, and the conflict therefore will continue in other ways or continue through violence. And I think this is more so actually in Gaza, where Hamas is not the only armed group. There are a number of groups. And in fact, there are ISIL pockets in Gaza that need to be carefully watched and contained.
Yeah.
So I think it can't be rushed, this process.
Well, absolutely. But from the Israeli perspective, it's not so much about sequencing. It comes down to trust. They just do not believe that Hamas and the groups you point to beyond Hamas are going to disarm.
I think that's perfectly understandable, because from conversations I've had in Israel, and particularly after October 7th, they talk about the inherited trauma, the collective trauma from October the 7th, and added on the individual trauma of reservists going into the army for a period and then going back into ordinary civilian life. So there is zero trust, but that zero trust exists on both sides. And let's face it, we're 25 years plus on the Good Friday Agreement. We still haven't reached the level of trust in Northern Ireland that is essential, to build and cooperate together fully. So I think the zero trust is an inevitable starting point, but it has to be addressed.
Thanks to Oliver McTurnan. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Yolan Nell, who's watching this meeting, which is ongoing in Jerusalem. It was a break with normal diplomatic convention, this meeting in Cairo yesterday with Hamas. But by all accounts, the reports we're getting from Cairo suggest that there was something positive in it. Do we know what he's taking into this meeting with Netanyahu?
I think that what Jared Kushner will be taking to his meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister is really some reassurances about this roadmap, and that Hamas is genuinely committed to disarmament. This is a process where there is a verification mechanism built in, because Israel has been really raising a lot of questions about that. In terms of other reservations by the Israelis, I mean, they have said that they want to have a full and genuine disarmament by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups before they'll have any Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza. And the roadmap that was agreed between the Board of Peace and Hamas is supposed to see a phased Israeli withdrawal as Hamas begins giving up its weapons. There is a general skepticism among the Israeli public about Hamas's willingness to disarm altogether, but then there are other details too that have been picked up a lot in the Israeli media, for example about Qatar and Turkey being involved in this verification mechanism to check that Hamas is meeting its commitments. There's been a demand too for the weapons that are given up to be destroyed, not just held in storage by a Palestinian technocratic committee that is to go into Gaza.
Yolan Nell in Jerusalem, thank you very much indeed.